Hi there everyone, Lars here with an anime review brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and holy dang, I am kicking myself for having slept on this anime. Ranking of Kings is incredible. I am so happy that I have sat down to binge this anime. It is so freaking good. This is the Song of Ice and Fire fix that I didn't know that I need. And in fact, it beats a Song of Ice and Fire. Now, as many of you who have followed us here on Camille's Harem would know, I am not a huge fan of the Game of Thrones series. I think that it is way overhyped, and I've talked about a lot of the problems that the series has, as well as the fact that George R. R. Martin will never finish this series, so it will always just remain an incomplete mess. And yet, despite all of my hatred for so much what happens within A Song of Ice and Fire, Ranking of Kings does a phenomenal job on delivering with just so many aspects that we've come to associate with Game of Thrones. With all of the politicking, with the assassinations, the darker tone, the magic, nuances, there's so much going on within this anime. And it does it so well. And now granted, this is not a grim dark story. And I think in a way that's one of the reasons why it's able to pull off all of these things so well. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit right here. So let's home in for a little bit right here. And let's talk about what this anime is all about. Ranking of Kings largely focuses on the adventures of Prince Boji, a midget, and not just a midget by human standards, but a midget especially by giant standards. He is the son of two giants, cursed to be just insanely small, incredibly weak, and he can neither speak nor hear. And yet Prince Boji, this amazing cinnamon roll of a child, wants to become the king who will inspire and lead his people, protect them, and be everything that his mother wanted him to be. It is such a precious setup right here, and I love how just so much of it is executed. Now then, because as I said, this is basically a Song of Ice and Fire, this is basically Game of Thrones right here, there then is a lot of politicking. There are assassinations, there's straight up murder, there's actually quite a bit of death that happens within this series. You have insane machinations across multiple kingdoms, you have demons, you have magic, you have revenge, you have sex, though it's not as blatant as what you would find on Game of Thrones. You have basically everything there, and it pulls it off so well. The animation style complements the darker storytelling perfectly, and there is wonderful balance between the precious and lighthearted moments along with all of the dark, disturbing moments throughout the entire anime. It is brilliantly balanced, so well paced. You need to watch Ranking of Kings. I think that this is an absolute must for anyone who is a huge fan of fantasy, and especially of epic fantasy, where they get deeper and darker into characters, their motivations, they expand the world, and there are so many different plots and everything just going on. And that's one of the things I love about this series is that, as I said, it's so well balanced. They balance out so many plots and plot points and characters. No one feels left behind. Everyone feels like they're developing at a pretty decent pace. And there are just so many character arcs and machinations and everything all coming to a head. And we're only halfway through the series. And I'm like, this is so good. Before I lose my head just screaming about how fantastic this anime is, I want to focus on three things about this anime that I believe it just absolutely nails, and where it puts Game of Thrones to shame. These three things are the political plots that happen throughout the story, strong women, and disabled characters. These are the three things that I believe the anime really excels at, and I just love it for this. So, very first one, political plots. There are so many plots and machinations at work here in this anime. It's honestly crazy. It sometimes gets a little bit difficult to follow. Wait a second, who is plotting against whom? Who's actually allied with whom? It's nuts. And yet it all works out. And one of the ways that it works out is that it follows through with nearly every single plot. Now, that doesn't mean that certain assassination attempts actually work out, or that someone actually gets what he or she wants, but rather that we get to see their plotting and their machinations actually play out. As someone who has read the books for A Song of Ice and Fire, I can tell you this: it is so maddening that half the time, actually more than half the time, all of the carefully set up plots and their intricate movements and how characters carefully play off of each other in this dangerous dance of power, that at any given moment a character can just get killed and everything that he or she tried to do leads to naught. And one of the worst moments for this is really Tyrion. Tyrion does so much throughout the series to try to set things up. And the sad thing is that when he is finally defeated and imprisoned, basically everything that he tried to do to save the kingdom just goes out the window. And I mean out the window in that there's almost no long-reaching repercussions or ripple effects. Barely any. Why? Well, because George R. R. Martin was done with that plotline, decided to throw it out, and Tyrion, you are now a hobo who is rushing to the other side of the world to I don't know, find out where the whores come from. That's really what it is in the book! On the other hand, we have Ranking of Kings. There are, as I said, so many different plots at play. And what I love is that we get to see them play out. There are a couple of different assassination attempts, which are really, really cool, really, really well set up, and yet they don't go the way that you think that they would, especially one of them. I'm not going to give any spoilers right here, but there was one assassination attempt that I was certain one character was going to get killed because the assassin who comes after him is just so incredibly good, and it doesn't work out. And I was like, whoa, what the? I was not expecting that. And it then leads the character who survived the assassination attempt to then go on a completely different character arc than what you thought he was going to go on, and ends up then joining with the villains. And I was just like, oh, this is so amazing right here. I love this. I love that it wasn't just like I've defeated the man. Now I'm going to go back on my regular trip. But no, because this assassination attempt happened, he's like, oh, I need to go back. I got stuff I got to do. I got to clean house. It's really, really good. And that's just one of many different moments. You've got kings conspiring against each other. You've got magicians conspiring against each other. You have a magician who's overthrown an entire kingdom. You have one king who was being held hostage by people that he thought he could trust. There is just so much amazing stuff going on right here. And all of their stories are allowed to play out. Death is very much a part of the series, but no character is just simply off for the shock factor. Instead, their stories are allowed to play out, so that way we can see the full effects of whatever choices they have made. And that level of autonomy is absolutely crucial to pulling off a good political plot, because people plot for all different reasons, and we see that both in A Game of Thrones and also in Ranking of Kings. People plot for power. People plot for love. People plot for their friends, to protect others, or they are just simply completely sucked up into this game of power and death, that you just have all these different motivations playing out. And once again, Game of Thrones really ends a lot of these machinations prematurely just to show, oh, everyone's at danger, anyone can die. And then George R. R. Martin then just drops all of those plots. There are very, very few that have any kind of ripple effect. Whereas in Ranking of Kings, we get to see the ripple effects of all the different characters' choices, and it leads to some pretty interesting places. Things start happening that you would not have expected just the episode before because of what a character does. And like I said, not all plots play out the way that the characters intended them to. And that's totally fine. You don't need to completely fulfill every single scheme. That's not what you have to do as a creator. Instead, you just have to show how these schemes combine and merge to create unexpected consequences, and that the people who are able to roll with them are usually the ones who end up on top. Now, speaking of power and autonomy, those are things that are absolutely essential to having strong female characters. And as someone who has read all the books in A Song of Ice and Fire, there are so few female characters who actually have real autonomy, who actually have real strength to them. Rather, they're just there to be women who are used and abused. Like, oh, look how dark and evil this world is. We get it. This is grimdark fantasy, George R. R. Martin. It just doesn't really work. People praise these books for having strong female characters, and they point to characters like Cersei and Sansa. And I will say this, the show definitely does these characters a much better service, but still, Cersei and Sansa are not the kind of queens I would point to for strong female characters. On the other hand, we have a character like Queen Hyling, who is absolutely phenomenal. She is a character who continuously throws you for a loop as to what she's going to do next. She is a character who's very much motivated by the love that she has for her family. And if there's one thing that I love that Brandon Sanderson has said, and there's many things I love that Brandon Sanderson Senpai has said, but one of the things that he said is that the most dangerous woman in the world is a mother who loves her children, because you have no idea what lengths she is going to go to. And here we have a queen who desperately loves her sons, her adopted son and her biological son. And she's willing to do whatever is necessary to make sure that the best things happen for them. Now, that doesn't mean that she always makes the right choices. Oh no, she makes lots of mistakes. She's a very flawed character. And yet it is those flaws and her attempts to overcome those flaws and prove her love to her children that makes her such a great character. She is a woman who will not be constrained by the actions of others. And she ends up becoming a very inspiring force throughout the series. And that is one of the things that you want to look for in a strong female character. A female character who is driven by relatable and realistic motivations, who has actual heart to her, and who shows her strength not so much through her ability to just be the best at whatever it is that she does, but by using everything at her disposal to either serve her own interests or to serve the interests of other people. Hopefully to their betterment, and if to their detriment, oh boy, the people who are on this woman's warpath, good luck to ya. That's what you want to see with a strong female character. Someone who has power, who has autonomy, who has clear motivations, and who is given time within the story to exercise all of that and show us the depth of her character. The last thing that I said that this show does incredibly well is the empowerment of disabled characters. It is incredibly cringy and frustrating to come across a story where a character who is disabled is given some sort of power-up that basically takes away that disability. And that's something that you don't want to have within a story. Because for people who are disabled, the reality is that they will probably never get out of that situation. Instead, they have been able to form meaningful lives for themselves where their disability is not a hindrance, but rather just a simple part of their life, or they've even turned that weakness into a strength. Now, within A Song of Ice and Fire, I really love the character of Bran, but Bran is given so little time within the series that as the cripple who is supposed to help save the world, we get so little from him. He gets so little development. He is just basically the kid who is confined to a sled or to be carried around by people, and his best power is to warg. Because by the point that you get in the 5th books, no, he's not able to fly through dreams or time and whatnot like what you get to see in the show. And even then, the show just really doesn't know what to do with Bran. It's like the entire series has no idea what to do with this incredible character, and so he's just the creepy kid in the chair. And that's not what you want to do with your crippled characters. So we then look at someone like Prince Boji. Prince Boji is a midget. He has no real physical strength. He's mute and he's deaf. And so, as a result of all of these, he's put at a massive disadvantage. And people don't want him to be king because they see him as weak. They see him as stupid and everything because they just can't communicate with him. And his simple and somewhat naive ways to the world make him seem even more ridiculous. And yet, it is that purity of character that ends up being a very great strength to him. Because Boji doesn't want to become king to lord over other people or to go out on conquests. He wants to be king so that way he can protect and provide happiness for his citizens, for his subjects. Now, towards this end to become king, Boji has to overcome all of these different obstacles. There's really nothing he can do about his size, and as we learned, there's really nothing he can do about his strength. So instead, he has to figure out how he can best maneuver with these weaknesses. And thanks to the help of people with whom he has befriended along the way, they teach him how to utilize his other senses, to use his sight to read lips, use his skin to feel the movements in the air and be completely aware of his situation even though he is deaf. And by having this incredible awareness, he's been able to develop really strong reflexes and very good speed that allows him to avoid conflict. And this works really well with a mostly peaceful character who doesn't want to be king to hurt people, but rather to protect people. So as a result, he has crafted his strengths around his desire and to balance out his weaknesses. And this is just really, really great to see because when we read about disabled characters within stories, we want to see them make the most of what they have. There are things that they will never have, and it's very disingenuous to kind of give them those things because, well, that's just getting lost in a self-gratifying power fantasy, which most people in those positions really don't want. That feels like you're speaking down to them. And I know that it seems kind of weird right here. I'm going to put this as a little aside. This might seem a little bit weird to hear from a guy who supposedly can walk, talk, run, everything that he wishes to do on his own. But as someone who spent 2 years in a wheelchair and having to relearn how to walk, it's a very humbling experience. And when you're in the moment, when you're in the thick of that, you learn to make do with what you have. And having had friends who, for their entire lives, will be confined to wheelchairs, it's incredible to see how they have overcome these obstacles by being inventive, by playing into other strengths. They don't allow these disabilities to define them. No, they come up with other things to define who they are, their personalities, their sportsmanship, their hobbies, their interests, their family. And that's what Boji does. Boji is not defined by his deafness or by his muteness or by his weakness and small stature. Indeed, by halfway through the series, you almost forget his disabilities because he's come to define himself by the sweet cinnamon roll that he is, by his dedication to this worthy cause to become king to protect everyone, by his love for his family, and by how he has learned to develop these all new skills to become a great warrior in his own right. And once again, kind of speaking for myself as an author, when I wrote my newest book, Bleed, Steam, and Steel, I put in one character who is crippled from the waist down. And it was such a joy to write this character who has to completely redefine himself within a society where people who are crippled the way that he is are seen as basically dead weight. And that there's really nothing that they can offer. And so he becomes someone through his intelligence, through his tenacity, through his wit, through his humor. He becomes someone who is very valuable to his kingdom, even if no one truly acknowledges it. And that was a lot of fun to write because it empowers a character who will never walk. And with Boji, the series does a great job of empowering a character who will never speak the way that anyone else can truly understand him, who will never be able to hear people, and who will never be able to have greater strength than what he already has. And honestly, that's really, really beautiful to see. These are just 3 reasons as to why Ranking of Kings is such a great story. So once again, it gets my high recommendation. I really say everyone should go out, should check out Ranking of Kings. It is absolutely worth it. You will not regret spending time with this series at all. And so with that being said, those are my recommendations. There's a little bit of writing advice right there. Make your strong women have real autonomy, have real power, real character depth, real character arcs. Make sure that if you're writing disabled characters, that you're not speaking down to that community and that you're not giving them random power-ups or something like that. That's disingenuous. Instead, that you're letting them become their best selves with what they have. And that's incredibly empowering. And if you're going to write political plots, let those political plots play out a little bit and let the consequences reverberate throughout the story, and that will give all of the different characters and their actions real meaning. Alright, so that's enough from me. Once again, please go check out Ranking of Kings, and while you're at it, please go also check out our other videos here on YouTube and our podcast episodes on Camille's Harem found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We also have writing exercises for all you novice writers out there to try out over at our Pinterest page, and if you would like to become part of our community, please go check out our subreddit and our Discord. Links for all of those sites are down in the description below, and until the next video, y'all, thank you for joining us on this adventure that we call writing, and tschüss.